call it a coincidence, but just last month, on this very channel, we began dissecting the legal frameworks around some of gaming's biggest titles. These games, Fortnite, Roblox, Genshin Impact, are not new. What is new, however, is a fundamental shift in public and legal awareness of the mechanics operating beneath their surfaces. We exposed how the FTC brought a landmark case against Genshin Impact's developer, and through analysis of a similar game, Crystal of Atlan, we demonstrated how companies use cryptic fine print buried deep in the terms of service to strip players of their rights. We warned that these were not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a system where a reckoning was inevitable. We had no idea how soon or how massive that reckoning will be, because in the weeks since those videos, the floodgates have opened. And these lawsuits are not just about unfair loot boxes. They are about something far more dangerous. The core accusation is, despite being fully aware of these risks, defendants marketed their respective games, Roblox, Fortnite, and Minecraft, to minors without implementing simple safety features. And what are these risks they were fully aware of? The lawsuits are explicit, citing decades of scientific research, changes to brain function, cognitive decline, and physical and emotional deficits. To understand how seismic this shift is, we have to look at the legal history. For years, regulators have been chipping away at the edges of these issues. You may remember, in fact, the 2022 FTC case against Epic Games, which resulted in a $500 million settlement for using dark patterns to trick players into unintentional purchases, or the landmark Genshin Impact settlement we just discussed. Those cases were fought on the grounds of consumer protection law. Was the advertising deceptive? Were the costs unclear? But these new lawsuits make a far more profound argument. They are not suing under consumer law, they are suing under product liability law. This is critical because they are arguing that these video games are defectively designed products. It's like suing a car company not because the sticker price was misleading, but because the brakes were intentionally designed to be somehow unreliable. The argument is no longer about fairness, it's about safety. So, how do you argue a video game is defectively designed? The lawsuits allege a deliberate, calculated strategy. They claim that these companies employ entire teams of data scientists, neurobiologists, and behavioral psychologists to create what they call compulsion loops. One of the core mechanics cited is operant conditioning. This is a foundational principle of behavioral psychology, most famously demonstrated by Skinner. The lawsuits allege that everything, from the flash animation of a loot box opening to the specific sound effects, are engineered to trigger a dopamine release in the brain, conditioning the player to associate spending money with a neurological reward. This conditioning is supercharged by a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. It's the mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. You pull the lever and you might get a reward. The uncertainty is what keeps you pulling, hoping the next one is the big one. Therefore, the plaintiffs argue this isn't just fun game design, especially when microtransaction methodology and addictive operant conditioning design are combined. It's a deliberate, scientific process to exploit human psychology for profit, turning players, especially minors whose brains are still developing, into sources of recurring revenue. And the lawsuits are not abstract at all. They are filled with devastating stories. They describe minors spending thousands of dollars without parental knowledge, suffering from sleep deprivation, declining academic performance, social isolation, and severe emotional distress. The lawsuits seek not just financial compensation, but also funding for medical monitoring and treatment programs. This is the first front of the war, a legal battle arguing that these games are not just products, but products that are knowingly designed to be harmful. This is not a retreat. While the gaming industry fights this defensive war in the courts, the global gambling industry has begun a quiet, offensive campaign to claim the very same territory. The evidence comes from these patent filings by IGT. What they describe is not the present but a potential engineered future, a sort of multiverse scenario where the worlds of gaming and gambling officially unite. In this potential future, the game developer makes the skill game, but when a player wants to open a loot box, the request is routed to IGT, the licensed gambling host. IGT uses its government-certified, audited random number generators to determine the price and sends the result back to the game. They are building a legal firewall. The game company can say, "We don't do gambling," and the gambling company can say, "We are fully licensed and regulated." It's a strategy to legitimize the very mechanics being sued over. But how do you deploy these in a world with patchwork regulations? The second patent reveals the key: location awareness. This system is designed to exploit a huge divide in consumer protection, a divide most clearly seen between the United States and my home, the European Union. Here in the EU, the approach is proactive and principle-based. The upcoming Digital Fairness Act aims to build a broad shield for consumers. It explicitly targets the addictive design of digital products and the exploitation of consumer vulnerabilities. It wants to stop the harm before it happens. The US, by contrast, is largely reactive. It relies on a state-by-state legal framework and lawsuits after the damage is done. Therefore, IGT's patent could be a legal scalpel. It allows a company to turn on these mechanics in a US state where they can get a license and turn them off in an EU country where principles of digital fairness will likely prohibit them. But here is the most critical part of their strategy. Buried in the patent claims is a feature they will, no doubt, use as their primary defense: responsible gaming limits. They will argue this system is safer because it's regulated and allows players to set their own spending limits. But this could be a Trojan horse. By wrapping these mechanics in the language of responsible gaming, the goal could be to normalize the presence of regulated gambling inside gaming products. However, these games are used predominantly by children and young adults, so the system needs a very strong set of rules to avoid all players, especially minors, from playing any game with gambling-enabled loot boxes. It's a preemptive strike designed to reframe the debate from "should this exist at all?" to "how should we regulate it?" It's a brilliant and deeply concerning legal and technological gambit. So we have these two fronts: a legal assault claiming these games are addictive and a technological plan to legitimize their most controversial mechanics. Both of these fronts pivot on one central, unresolved question. After all the money and all the time, what do you actually own. And in the EU, the regulators are starting to define the terms. The Consumer Protection Cooperation Network now considers in-game currencies purchased with real money as having a direct link to real-world monetary value, and transactions made with them are subject to consumer protection laws. But this is a principle. The reality on the ground in the end-user license agreement that you agree to is a war against that principle. As we showed in our Genshin Impact video, their terms are explicit. You are not entitled to a refund for any virtual currency. These agreements almost universally define everything you acquire not as a property but as a limited, non-transferable, revocable license. Revocable means that they can take it away for any reason. Your investment, your time, your collection, it can vanish overnight. Therefore, even if you spend thousands of dollars on an addictive product, the legal framework is designed to ensure that if the company decides to cut you off, you have lost nothing of recognized legal value. And to make sure you can challenge fees in open court, they use mandatory arbitration and class action waiver clauses. So, we must ask, what is the end game here? An ecosystem where a product alleged to be psychologically manipulative extracts real money from players. But the legal architecture of that same ecosystem simultaneously insists that the digital items acquired have no value, that the player has no ownership, and that any dispute must be settled in secret outside of the public court system. The endgame is normalization. It is a future where the line between engaging entertainment and regulated gambling is permanently blurred, where the psychological exploitation is firewalled by legal contracts, and where your rights as a consumer are reduced to a license that can be revoked at any moment. The core conflict is not just about digital ownership. It is about mental safety, financial transparency, and the fundamental right to be protected from products designed to exploit your very brain chemistry. The consumer, whether you are the player, the parent, or the child, is not just caught in the crossfire. The consumer is the target. Thank you for watching. And if you believe in this mission, if you want to be ready for what comes next, please subscribe.